How important are a number of coaching skills across different sports? We often wonder about the subtleties or nuances between Gaelic football and hurling, and how some coaches may be more suited to hurling and some may be more suited to football because of their knowledge around the game. But how often do we step further outside and look at the skills coaches from sports outside of the GAA family can bring back to us? I spoke with a man who's coached a few clubs at League of Ireland level, having gone all the way to European competitions. In terms of qualifications, he's gone all the way up to UEFA Pro licence. He'll also broaden his coaching experience in both hurling and football. Shane Keegan discussed a number of coaching skills or behaviours he has learned and developed through his time in soccer and used in pretty much the same way across hurling and Gaelic football, as he's coached senior club teams, informing his role as games manager at Leash Senior GA, and next season we'll be bringing that to a senior inter-county role. We looked at different ways of designing practices, how we do opposition analysis, types of feedback, but more importantly how that feedback is delivered, and how we can take our game model to inform all of the trend sessions and activities to do in trend to help us prepare a team to play the best way we see fit for them to reach peak performance. Shane is a really experienced and knowledgeable coach, but breaks all this down in really practical, easy to understand ways for coaches to go and implement pretty much straight away. Shane, over the last couple of years, you've managed a senior hurling club team in Laois, a senior hurling club team, hurling and football in Tipperary, and won a mid-tip final, which is a very, very competitive competition. You're going in with a senior inter-county hurling team, but you're very much Shane Keegan, the soccer man.
Am I still? Yeah, I suppose. Maybe. It depends who you're talking to, I suppose, yeah.
Well, a mutual acquaintance of ours has been coaching only GAA for the last 20 years, and he's still known as in the locality as John Michael. He's a real soccer man.
Yeah, it's a hard tag to shake, and you'll get abuse from both ends when somebody on the football front doesn't like something. They'll say, sure, listen, he's gone off in the GAA, what would he know? And when somebody in the GAA angle doesn't like something, you say, sure, he was always a soccer man, what does he know? So you get it from both sides.
Always a soccer man. But that's something we want to dig into today. So you've gone I know you've done some of the formal GAA coach education, because I think you're on two of the courses I gave, both the foundation, or ICGG as is now, and one of your award 2 days, but you've also gone all the way to pro licence in soccer. And I know just the coach education instructor is kind of in Ireland is kind of mapped off the steps in the soccer one, because we kind of have to map to something, and that probably goes the highest. So looking at it, I was thinking award 2 is probably around, in how it's written, around the national C licence, but you've got another further 3 steps on that. I want to dig into some of the bits that you learned on that kind of formal education stuff on the soccer side, and what could be taken across and applicable to GAA. And then we might jump at some of the cultural differences later on. So you might lay out to us, first of all, what are the steps in the formal coaching soccer? And then we'll look at what are some of the specific bits you actually have to do to get those.
Yeah, well, even I'm out of date already in that the structure as is now within the FAI for the formal pathway is different than when I went through it. There is new titles on some of the different courses. So when I did it, it was Kickstart 1, Kickstart 2, Youth Cert, B licence, A licence, Pro licence. And I would have done my Kickstart 1. I went to Australia for a year when I just turned 21. Would have done my Kickstart 1 just when I got back. So I was out there for a year. So I was 22, let's say, doing my Kickstart 1. And I was 28 doing my pro license. So I managed to rattle through them fairly quickly. 6 years kind of took me from bottom to top, which would be irregular enough, I suppose. And I suppose 2 reasons for that. One was because quite often the licenses, rightly or wrongly, you can debate this, the licenses with the FAI tend to be linked in with your own progression. To give you a very obvious example, I actually applied for my pro license, went to meet Mick Wallace for a chat about going in as Wexford Youths manager. I was operating in the old League of Ireland A Championship, which would have been the 3rd tier. Applied for my pro license with FC Carlow, League of Ireland third tier down on my application form, and went and met Mick Wallace for lunch, agreed terms and agreed to take the Wexford Youth job. And when I came out of the meeting, John, I looked down on my emails and I had an email from the FAI telling me that I had been rejected. My application for the pro licence had been rejected, that there were people of a higher standard, operating at a higher standard ahead of me in the queue. To which I then had to send back a reply saying, lads, just a heads up that I've literally just accepted the Wexford Youth's job and will be a League of Ireland First Division manager next year. Does this change my application in any way whatsoever? And immediately got an email back saying, yes, it does, you're on. So it just, and I get it. I do get it. You know, they have to have some criteria for how they decide who gets onto all of these different things. So the level that you're operating. But I know some people would find a frustration with that too. That it's kind of chicken and egg. How do I become a better coach, or how do I equip myself for the next level if I can't do the qualification I need until I'm managing at the next level? And the other little trick, or the other little manoeuvre I pulled to try and rock up the levels as quickly as I could was I was waiting to get on the A licence, and the queue again was quite a while. I was probably going to be waiting a couple of years to get on the A licence, and I had a contact in the IFA who rang me on a Wednesday and told me that the A licence up there was starting on the coming Monday and they just had somebody drop out of it. And would I be ready to move on it that quick that I jump straight onto it that coming Monday? So I actually did my A licence with the IFA, which was good too, John, because it gives you a different perspective. You know, different associations do go about things in a very, very different way. So going up there and seeing how they went about things was just gave a different perspective and a different angle on things as well.
Yeah, that's interesting. I don't want this to become the steps of coach education here, but even like, say when I did my award too, I remember, like, it depends so much as well on the other people around, because you're put in groups for discussions, and some of them I was like, I am not saying a word here, I'm just going to soak up everything these others are saying. And sometimes you're in groups, you're like, the next 20 minutes might not, like in a self-train, might not be that beneficial to me based on some of the bits are going over and back. But like, say when it comes to coach behaviours, this is the main bit I want to look at today, is I'm looking at like instruction, feedback, question, design and planning, observation, all like that. How much of like the formal education is given to those, and how much is more on like soccer specific stuff, as in shape, tactics, how you develop those, how you do maybe bits of analysis, all like that. Just tease that out for us, and then we'll start looking more into detail on some of the coach behaviours.
Yeah, again, if I think back to the start of it, I'm not sure. I think we were absolutely learning coaching behaviours without it being an expressed intent to teach us coaching behaviours, particularly on those early ones. I mean, I've spoken before, I was incredibly lucky that I'm in Portlaoise here at the moment. I did my Kickstart 1 in Portlaoise Soccer Club here, as I say, when I was 22. Jesus, literally 22 years ago now. So I did, and my coach educator that day was a guy called Noel O'Reilly. I'm not sure if Noel's name has come across your radar before. Noel unfortunately passed away a good few years ago, but he's held in such standing that the National Grassroots Coach of the Year award is called the Noel O'Reilly Award. I don't think anybody since that day has had as big an impact on me as Noel had over the weekend that we spent with him for our Kickstart 1. And I suppose, like I say, without knowing the terminology coaching behaviours, I suppose the simplest way I would have said it to you is I would have come away from that course saying, I want to become him. I want to be him. The manner in which he imparted knowledge, the way he went about coaching, the way he went about communicating with the kids. He had a group of kids working under him to sample what the different practices he was looking to use. But most of all, the way he made them feel. So basically, an email went out that week saying, if any of you have got kids who would like to be participants in the content we're delivering, bring them along. Now, I was too young at the time, but I did the course with another guy from my local club, John Bow, at the time, and John's young lad, Shane, came along, and Shane was quite a good little player. And the way Noel O'Reilly interacted with Shane, and not just Shane, all the kids, just Shane is the one I would know, was just incredible. Like Shane was in our car driving home after that course, and he was 10 foot tall, like absolutely 10 foot tall. And as I say, Noel was able to have this impact on every single one of the kids in that course. He made them all feel special. He gave them all little one-on-one conversations. He was, very, very quickly able to he was using the shit sandwich before I knew what a shit sandwich was. He'd go over to Shane and tell him he was brilliant at this, and but you know what you could do with working a little bit more on. And he'd give him the, whatever that was. And then, before walking away it was, but I'll tell you what, you've serious little talent on you if you keep the head down, and you're just so natural. And that's more, as I say, that's more the behaviours. The technical content of what he was putting on as well, John, was like it was the most basic of basics, but yet it was still beyond what I knew at that stage. So it was, like he was teaching, 3v1 rondos, and the whole concept of the middleman on the ball needs to have an option on his right and on his left. So, if the ball goes left, you need the person off the ball needs to adjust their position so that they're now moving across the grid, so that their new person who's receiving the ball has an option on their left and on their right. Probably makes no sense. Makes sense in my head. And all of that kind of stuff, like he as I say, listen, I've been lucky enough, had some very, very good coach educators the whole way up along, but he would still be the one to me that was miles ahead. But he would never have used any of the phrases that you have used there, yet he would have been the embodiment of teaching all of those things at the time, if you get me.
No, that's really good, because I'm looking for like the examples of this stuff. So say, for example, a method of feedback is to use that praise sandwich. And you've just given an example. Like someone could say, I like how, say we were doing similar this morning, I like how your hands enter the water there. I would like if your legs lifted up a little bit higher. That way we won't hear such a smack as your belly hits the water. But I liked how you transitioned into swimming afterwards. But that's a boring enough way of doing it. Whereas you're saying when someone can put their personality into it and have a bit of life around, and like you're really trying to show the player you have a connection and a belief in them in their long-term development as you deliver that feedback, can be so much more important than here is what you're supposed to deliver.
Absolutely. And again, stuff that I'd like to think comes reasonably second nature to me at the time. But when you're starting out, like those early years they're still the most enjoyable, because you have the most capacity for new stuff. I suppose there's the most room for acceleration in your learning, probably. And again, I'm thinking of a particular, so Noel was delivering a practice on receiving the ball and was teaching the kids the correct body shape and how to let the ball come across their body and receive on their back foot, so now they were opened out in the opposite direction and able to continue forward, and that sort of stuff. And that was delivered in isolation, then was delivered in a semi-competitive practice. But then the huge part of it was when somebody did that, when he went into his 5v5 or 6v6 game, and in the build-up phase, as they were playing, somebody did that very well. I mean, he would absolutely jump all over that then. Absolutely. One lad could dance past three fellas and buried in the top corner, and he mightn't get a word of praise from Noel. But another fella might see a ball coming, let it roll across his body, receive it on his back foot and play a 5-yard pass. And all of a sudden, this is what Noel would leap on. Absolutely leap on. Hey, that's exactly it. Nailed it. Absolutely nailed it. And that idea of the positive reinforcement around what the key outcome you're looking to improve within your session. And now all of a sudden, if I'm Billy and I'm after dancing around 5 players and burying in the top corner, but I got no praise, but I see Joe is after getting great praise for opening out his body and receiving on his back foot, well, that's what I'm going to try and focus my efforts on, because I want those nice things said about me,
Oh man, they're like such good examples there. I'm going to like try. Usually people come to me with theory and I try and turn it into practical. It's the opposite here. You give me these brilliant practical examples, and I'm trying to, like, if anyone's interested in the theory side. So that's a really good example, like practice design. He has the thing he wants to work on, and he has an objective of, I want them to get better at receiving the ball and working on the body position around that. And he's designed his practice around, at the start we work on it in isolation, just in pairs, in threes, develop that to maybe doing it, but you have to make a little bit of a decision afterwards. Then in lower levels of competition, maybe 4v1, 5v2, little bit like that. that. Then you put it into your semi-competitive. Like that's layering up of training. And then all his feedback and the thing he's observing are still tied back to the objective, as you said there. Someone could do something else brilliant, but he's not touching it. He's still refined around my observation on what I'm looking at here is defined by the objective I set out at the start of the session. And that's such a good example there.
And you know, John, actually, I missed the part, I should say, because I actually had this conversation with somebody recently. So I'm a Kinnerk disciple, I suppose, and I try and mop up everything I can in relation to Kinnerk and his academic papers and just anything I can get my hands on. Noel would have started his practices with a 6v6 game. Then he would have done all those different parts I told you about and then finished with a 6v6 game. So before Kinnerk or any of these boys were talking about whole, part, whole, Noel O'Reilly was delivering his sessions whole, part, whole.
Yeah, that was something like, because I know you were on to me about Keno D stuff as well, the games-based stuff. And I know they were looking at games-based stuff for physical outcomes. There was still like very much a practice and an improvement on something else within the game. Start with your big game, distill it down, refine the thing you want to work on and put it back out into the big game, and let's see how that develops out into it there.
Yep, exactly.
Other point I'll bring up, something I read in Paul Kilgannon's book years ago, because remember like, people always say about spot and fix. It's one of the big terms in coach education, spot and fix. But sometimes we don't actually need to fix stuff. And he changed to spot and raise awareness. And again, that's another really good example of I've spotted something being done well and I highlight it now to all of the other players so they can see what's good, so they could then try and go and emulate or model that themselves.
100%, and to me, like that I would be going after that. I would have at least a 50-50 balance, particularly with kids, whatever about when you get up as far as adults, and they want it as well, but with kids, like the idea of let's keep an eye out for everything they're doing wrong and stop it when they do it wrong so we can explain how to do it right, rather than let's keep an eye out for somebody who does it really well so we can stop the game and explain to everybody the brilliant example he just gave of how to do it well. You know, one, you know, you should be leaning into one over the other there, in my opinion.
No, I completely agree. Because it's not about fixing, it's about highlighting the positives. So as you progress on then, your B license, Pro A license, Pro license, all like that, what are some of the big things that you're actually focusing on there? Like I'm thinking often of the way the GAA one is divided up into like your physical module or section, your technical one, your tactical one. Is the soccer divided up similarly, or do they look at a kind of a different thread? And then once we look at some of the bits there, how do you bring them across to the GAA world?
Yeah,
if you have.
Yeah, so I suppose they very much go after technical improvement, because I suppose on your Kickstart 1, your Kickstart 2, your Youth Cert, like they are not, and rightly so, they are not coaching you to become a winning coach. They have no interest in whether you produce winning teams or not. That's not their brief, and I'd agree with them on that. Their brief is to try and equip you with the skills that will improve individual players. So it would all be very, very technical based, literally next to nothing tactically covered over those first 3 levels anyway, I would have thought. I would say the first time we ever start speaking about a formation would have been at UEFA B level, which, as I say, I would broadly agree with on that. The physical development, yeah, that probably only started to come in, I suppose. UEFA B, UEFA A, things are split up into different modules. And then you have your physical conditioning module and all of that kind of stuff. Now, you still would have done a huge amount of, because to be fair, they're trying to base it in reality, right? And if you're operating, let's say UEFA B, right? If you're doing your UEFA B license, you're probably operating at a decent amateur club level, okay? So I would still have done quite a bit of amateur coaching over the last few years. I would have taken Portlaois's Leinster Senior League soccer team there for a couple of years recently enough. Chances of you having 2 things: 1, 22 players, and 2, a full-size pitch to operate in, are slim to none, John. Slim to none. So why would you be working in your UEFA B on 11v11 practice if you're never going to have the opportunity to do that? So again, you're taught the methods for, okay, if you've got 18 players, okay, so what phase of the game are you going to go after with those 18 players? Are you going to look at, a steady build attack or a fast transition attack? Or are you going to look at a high press? Or are you going to look at a deep zonal defence? And what players are you going to leave out because you don't have enough to go 11v11, are you going to leave out, the fullbacks for this particular phase? Or are you going to leave out your front two and the opposition's two centre backs for this particular phase? And what are you going to do to the pitch? How are you going to, what dimensions are you going to go with the pitch on this? Or if you are lucky enough and it's a Saturday morning, or you're not relying on floodlights or whatever, and it's a Sunday morning session where you do have a full pitch, but you've only got 16 players. So how are you going to manipulate the pitch dimensions? Are you going to box off one side of the pitch and work in 2/3 of the pitch? Are you going to box off the top third of the pitch and work in 2/3 of the width of the pitch, or the length of the pitch? And the key thing is, when you're doing your assessments, is, to be fair, they would stress that they don't have a right answer wrote down. What they want is your explanation as to why this is what you have decided to do. And so long as you can back that up with proper, I suppose, logic, they'll kind of roll with you on it. And then it's probably A license was, I really, really enjoyed the A license side of things, because that's when it got to like you're given assignments like, let's say the European Championships has just been on, right? So they would have access, obviously, to all the footage and that kind of stuff. And you would be given an assignment like, okay, you are due to play Germany in your first group game. Here is access to Germany's last 3 games. I want you to go away, I want you to analyse Germany's last 3 games, and I want you to design the 7-day lead-in period to your game against Germany. How often are you going to train? What are the specific things you're going to work on in the training sessions? Why? Why are you working on that based on what you've seen? Why have you decided to prioritise that element within your practice? The real kind of stuff, which I really, really enjoyed that, because it was very, very much real life.
Oh man, you've given me so much here now I want to jump into. I'm going to park the Germany bit and come back to it and the analysis and all, because I'm intrigued by that. First one is, I want to jump back to the technical based stuff. Hurling especially, from a lot of coaches, would have very much a technical focus. And a lot of people think they're of drills and sharpening and touch and all. When it comes to soccer, is it still the isolated work that people focus on, or is it more the technical execution of stuff but in more game-based environments, or is it like the practice design we mentioned earlier, you start off in isolation and you slowly layer it up, or somewhere in between all that?
Yeah, so and this is where advantage probably isn't the right word. This is where coming from the football background into the GAA has kind of served me a little bit, in the sense that, listen, hurling and Gaelic football are quite a stretch ahead of I'm afraid to say the word soccer because someone will lynch me, but I'm going to have to say it just to make terms easier. So Gaelic football and hurling in a lot of facets, physical conditioning, quite a lot of facets would be a good stretch. Professionalism, quite a lot of the time, ahead of soccer, but definitely, John, soccer has been ahead of Gaelic Games in terms of the move away from drill-based stuff to game-based stuff, and that has definitely helped me. So what's becoming the new way of coaching, I think, in Gaelic Games has been the way of coaching in soccer for a far more prolonged period. And I suppose before I properly got involved in any GAA coaching, I would still have watched an awful lot of it. Just one, because I had a massive interest in it, and two, because you're trying to learn from other coaches regardless of sport. And I would have got frustrated at the amount of drill-based, isolated stuff I was seeing, and I was trying to figure out how is this equipping them for the manic game that they play. I couldn't wrap my head around it. There would, for a long time now in the soccer world, there would be very, very, very little isolated practice, John, and even that's even right down at the lowest levels. Like I look after my young lads under 11 soccer team, right? And our training session, almost every single training session, like people, when you get a small bit of a profile, maybe people ask, can they come and observe and this and that? And I do have to warn people, like, you are going to go away if you're looking for magic dust here or rocket science in terms of my soccer training session with a group of under 11s, you are going to go away so disappointed. So you're welcome to come, but I can tell you before you land in what you're going to see. You're going to see 10 minutes of ball manipulation work, where basically every single one of my kids, I have a good group now, I have about 20 feckin' four of them. We trained there Monday night and we had 25 Monday night actually. Every one of them have a ball for the first 10 minutes, and I demonstrate various different ball control techniques. It might be a dribbling technique, it might be controlling a ball coming out of the sky technique, and I'll demonstrate something and I'll give them 30 seconds to all run around and practice it. Then I'll demonstrate another one, I'll give them 30 seconds, and we'll go through maybe 8 little techniques, and I'll say, okay, want you all working on those with your own ball at home over the course of the rest of the week. From there, we're lucky enough, we have a nice little Astro in our place which has 2 lengthways goals, if that makes sense, and then 4 widthways goals. So the lengthways pitch is split in. Yeah. So we've 6 goals in total. So what I'll do is I will pick 5 kids and I'll say, right, 5 of you head down to that goal, 1 of you jump in goal, the other 4 play 2v2, and every time there's 2 goals scored, rotate who the goalkeeper is. And I'll spread that across the 6 goals that we have. Some of the games might even be 1v1. I might send 3 to some goal. Now I will, in my own head, without it being too obvious, I will have streamed that a little bit. I do believe in kids. The best way to get improvement in kids is to be playing with and against somebody of a similar standard. I'd be a very strong believer in that. So I'll send them off all around into the 6 different goals. Literally just somebody jump in the goal, kick the ball out, play 1v1 or 2v2, rotate the keeper every couple of goals. And myself and my other 2 support coaches will wander around, we'll watch what they're doing, we'll give a bit of encouragement, we'll maybe give it the slightest bit of technical instruction. It might have been hey, the pass was on there and you didn't see the pass because your head was down staring at the ball. Remember to lift your head so we can see when the pass is on, and literally just little things like that. We don't stop it at all. We'll just literally make a passing comment as they're continuing to play maybe. We'll go from that into 2 widthways games, which will be probably 2 6v6s. And then we'll go from that into a full-length pitch game, which is anarchy because it's 12v12, and it's not my favourite thing to do, but the kids want it. They love it. When are we going full pitch? So we would give them the last 10 minutes of the session maybe at full pitch, even though it's probably the least useful in terms of their own individual improvement. So that's our under 11 session on a Monday night. How did I get onto that? I can't even remember what you asked me.
I was asking about the balance between isolated and game or competitive practice in technical skills.
They get 10 minutes where they're not in a game-like situation at the start. And in that 10 minutes, every single person has a ball. I remember going to one particular hurling session at a pretty high level, John. Now, I do think coaching has moved on leaps and bounds. I'm talking just before I got involved myself. So it would have been just before I took over at Downey Earl, which would have been 2021, let's say. So maybe a session in 2020 at a pretty high level. And I remember standing on the sideline and watching a shooting drill in which I was able to count over 30 seconds between the time a fella received the ball to make a run and take his shot, and the next time he received the ball to make a quick run and take his shot. And so he was on the ball for 2 to 3 seconds and then off the ball for 30 seconds while he joined the back of the queue that he was waiting to have his going again. And I wanted to scream.
I'll just touch on drills, but shooting drills, I just cannot come up. And because I know players, sometimes trying to balance, players just like him sometimes. And if they really like him, let's give him a little bit of that. So, and someone I work with just said, sometimes if they're so used to drills, you don't want a revolution, you want an evolution. You just need to gradually drip them out of that. But sometimes they ask for shooting drills, and I just cannot come up with anything relevant whatsoever. So there have been 0 of them in the last year and a half. I just cannot come up with that meaningful law there. There are other little bits and how you gradually transition, I suppose, from unopposed to semi-competitive. That is a drill, is a game. It's somewhere in between, fair enough. But it's the guiding the players from the isolated practice that they love to more game or competitive stuff can take a little bit of time, a little bit of convincing if they're so used to the drills beforehand. But completely agree. I think we need to progress more towards using the skills of the game and the context where they'll actually be used or executed. And it's trying to think it around that as opposed to have a really sharp touch, be really good at kicking off both sides, like they're important, but kicking off both sides in a situation where you'll actually use it.
Yep.
And next bit I'll jump on to then was back to, you were saying about the moments of the game or the phases of play. And I find that, again, this is you forming your objective at the start of the session. Across the majority of invasion sports, attack, defence, transition from defence to attack, transition from attack to defence, and I suppose restarts are the main phases of player moments of the game, and you break them down. How you break them down in soccer might be completely different to rugby, to basketball, to GAA. Have you used that like categorising of phases of player moments of the game from soccer and brought that across to hurling for designing your sessions?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. No, everything would be. You kind of used your objective, so even beyond the coaching ground, everything with me in life is based on desired outcome. If anybody asks me to get involved in anything, or even if I'm asked to attend a meeting, I'll go to whatever meeting or I'll go and do whatever, so long as I'm expressly told at the start what the desired outcome is. And once I know what the desired outcome is, like, I suppose it was, it mightn't be as formal as task desired outcome. Like, I sent you a text this morning saying, what did you want to chat about? That's me asking, what's your desired outcome from me and you having a chat today?
It was yesterday. I plan a bit further ahead than that.
Yesterday, sorry. Yesterday, true. And once I have a desired outcome, then I can gear absolutely everything towards doing the best job I can in possibly trying to achieve that desired outcome, I suppose. And that's just, within my coaching sessions, every single coaching session has to have a broad desired outcome that we know we're going after, that in an hour's time we are going to be a little bit better at this particular thing than we were an hour ago, and in 4 weeks' time we're going to be a good bit better at this particular thing than we were 4 weeks ago, by scaffolding and layering it up and adding another bit to it the following week and another bit to it the following week. And I do believe in, I'm sure you've uttered the line or heard the line, I do believe strongly in repetition without repetition. Like, I would pride myself on variation. I do think players, one of the quickest ways to disengage players is for them to find themselves doing the same thing week after week after week. So I will have the same underlying theory behind what we're doing, and certainly the same desired outcome maybe for 3-4 weeks, but the actual activities used to try and get towards that desired outcome will be very varied and very different. But yeah, I think like it would be, it's exact same across all sports for me. And I do believe that with a reasonable level of understanding of a sport, and a massive amount of preparation, and then most importantly the right desired outcomes, I think most things can be coached. So they can. And I don't think I think again we make things sound a little bit too complicated maybe. I remember sitting down watching, remember when Spain were really dominant, doing like a Euros followed by a World Cup followed by Euros or something like that. I remember sitting down watching Spain in one of those finals with a pen and paper and just writing out a list of, well, why are Spain? Like, what are they doing so well? And that list would have included individual things that individual players, Spanish players, were capable of doing, but also, team play, different team play concepts that Spain were capable of carrying out. And by the end of that match, you had your training content for the next year. You literally had a list of all the things you need to be able to coach your players to be able to do to try and give a peak performance. And essentially, once I switched across to hurling and more recently Gaelic football, I've kind of just taken the same approach. I sat down and I watched a Limerick hurling performance, and what are all of the things that the Limerick hurlers were able to do, both in terms of individual play and in terms of team play. Right, here we go. Here's my training content for the next year. And likewise, when you go into the dual role with Brackens, you do the same, and you sit down and you watch a Kerry performance or somebody like that. And again, the same thing. You watch a full game. You watch the very best for one full game. Now, you're choosing a game where they've had a particularly impressive performance probably, and just keep writing down, they were good at this, they were good at this, they were good at this, they were able to do this, they were able to do this, this is how they dealt with this is how they dealt with this. There's your training content, there's your training plan for the next 12 months. So I think that approach works across any code, really, to be honest, John.
I really want to come back to that. I have a few notes written up. I want to come back first to you said repetition without repetition. Players get bored doing the same thing, but you don't mind working on the same objective over a number of weeks. Can you just give us maybe an example or explain to us what you mean by they're working on the same thing but they're not doing the same thing? I suppose repetition without repetition in action.
Yep, yeah. So I'll probably go after two things over the course of a 4-week period. I think if it's one, the focus can be a little bit too narrow. So I don't mind telling you. So for example, two things that we would be going after at the moment over a 4-week block would be scoring efficiency. So how are we going to get our scoring efficiency up? How am I going to design practices that are going to result in us hopefully improving our scoring efficiency? And one of the theories that obviously if you're going to try and work on two things at the same time, there's going to have to be some sort of relation between the two of them. So the other thing that we're working on at the moment is off the ball runs and trying to get again, the concept of a third man run has existed in soccer for a long time, whereas it's still a relatively newish term. You will still get plenty of hurlers or Gaelic footballers who might look at you a little bit queer when you use the phrase third man run. So we're looking at scoring efficiency at the moment, and we're looking at third man runs. So all of my content will have an element of one of those two things in them during that 4-week block. And there will be two ways of zoning in on it. There might be some training sessions where when I use the word punishment, like it's not it's a scoring punishment, as in I think we do a lot of scoring stuff. So let's say we're doing a small-sided game on the 40. Let's say, right, really practical example, right? So we step out a 15 stride by 15 stride grid, starting on the 45, moving towards the 65, okay? So we've got a 15 stride by 15 stride grid, and within that grid, we are playing 3v3 plus 1. So 3 blues against 3 yellows with 1 orange bib playing with whoever's in possession to help create the overload to try and make sure we do get plenty of shooting opportunities. So in something like that, I think the mistake I would have been making until I probably consumed myself a little bit more in the Lavin brothers approach and Knurk's approach and the constraints approach and all of that is I would have, okay lads, we're going at this for the next 2 minutes. Whichever team scores the most amount of points is the winner, right? So, like, if I'm a participant in that, it's largely about volume. If my team can get more shots off, my team are likely to win the game. But that's not going to improve scoring efficiency. That's going to improve amount of shots taken, but it's not going to improve scoring efficiency. So the slightest tweak in the world, which is very, very simple, when you poke the ball over the bar, your team gets a point. When you go for a shot and you miss, the opposition get a point. It's a whole different game now. It's a completely and utterly different game now. Now lads are going to think twice, is this the right time to shoot? Have I got a better than average chance of scoring from here? If I have, I go for my score. If I haven't, we recycle the ball to maybe it might take another pass or two before we actually go for that shot. So yeah, like tweaking all those little different rules, and as I say, it might be a negative or a punishment if you miss, the opposition get a point, or if we're going after third man runs, it might be a game that we're playing whereby we designate a player in an orange bib, and if that player, when he receives the ball, is able to offload it to a third man run within 2 seconds of receiving the ball and they score on the back of that, you get triple scores. So there's so many kind of little variations and little tweaks you can make to the games that you're still zoning in on the same desired outcome, but they're not doing the exact same practice that they did the previous week.
No, that's really good. I actually like that of if you score, you get a score. If you miss, the other team gets a score, because it's not, I don't think it is a punishment there. It's a consequence to your action, as opposed to punishment. Punishments are like, oh, you drop a ball, you do 5 push-ups. Like, I hate stuff like that. Now, at the same time, I don't mind putting what I call nominal punishments in for if someone does something that's not skill-based, but it's effort-based. You don't track a run. I'm going to highlight that. And I might make you do 3 star jumps. they're not going to have any negative impact on you, but they're going to highlight to everyone. I will call out people not doing effort-based stuff.
I'll tell you another one that works really well. And again, it sounds like a punishment, but it's not. You're trying to ingrain the concept of your team and trying to do the right thing for your team. Is if you're doing a shooting drill like that, you can say, rather than if you miss, the opposition get a score, you can say, if you miss, you have to step out until the next score is scored. And because now your team is down a man. Because you took a shot that wasn't on, or because you weren't because you weren't focused enough as you were taking that shot or whatever. Anything that just fucking narrows their focus and increases their focus and increases their want for that ball to go over the bar. If there's no negative to the ball not going over the bar, it might go, I'll have a crack.
But there is a positive to the ball going over the bar. Because if you just, like some coaches just focus on the negatives, particularly like non-competitive stuff, that you end up so fearful of doing something wrong, you actually don't do anything. But because there is a score for putting the ball over the bar, there's still an incentive to take the shot when it's on. But it's a different incentive. So like anytime scoring efficiency down is due to usually shot selection or shot execution, one of the two of those. So it puts an emphasis on the player to improve both of those or increase the percentages of both of those to have the positive, while still, do you know what, this isn't the shot to take. Or if they're in a really good position and they miss it, there is the incentive on that player to either focus in a bit more or go away and practice in isolation, a little bit of shooting from different places there. So it's completely different than people saying, let's avoid punishments.
And you do, and listen, again, to be fair, because there will be some people maybe questioning a small bit the way I've thrown it out there, you do absolutely have to keep an eye out for kind of the law of unintended consequences. Like, as you're watching that, if you see a fella who twice there was a chance for him to shoot, and on both occasions he took a soft pass option, you do have to, let a roar at that player and say, hey, I can see what you're at here, you're going missing. Come on, grow up here and, have a go at take one on for me.
But at the same time, it is representative practice, because it's similar to what would happen in a game. If he's afraid to miss in a game and not take the shot, then like it's letting you know so much more about him in that situation in the game as well. It's not like these fake pressure environments. It's a realistic one. So no, I really like that. I want to come back to then, and it's two bits to tie together. So first of all, back to that activity you said about go away, analyse Germany, prepare for them. I'm going to wonder here first, did they teach you a lot of skills around how to analyse opposition?
Yeah. No, the performance analysis modules were a big part of the upper end of the courses. Your A license and your Pro license. The performance analysis modules were. Listen, John. Again, you talk about the different areas where one code is ahead of the other, one sport is ahead of the other. Like the stuff going on analysis wise, and it's just because of the advantages they have. It's not that the performance analysts are more skilled in soccer than they are in the GAA. It's just like, so we're as a League of Ireland club. League of Ireland have a package deal with a company called Y Scout, right? They bounce between two companies, Y Scout and Instat. I think they're with Y Scout still at the moment. I'm out of the League of Ireland circle a little bit for the last while, but within 24 hours of the final whistle in a League of Ireland game, I would receive an email with a 34-page statistical match report with every number you could possibly conceive under the sun included in this. I'll fire one through to you on WhatsApp. The level of detail in it is phenomenal. You then log on to the website, and every single touch of the ball was in that game has been coded. Like if I want to click on John Murphy's successful passes, I literally click in your name, I click on successful passes, and it'll show me every successful pass you played in that game instantly, and allows you just to create instant playlists. And that's just a blunt example. There's so many different actions I can click on. And that's all there for you within. And by the way, that's the thing here is everybody has access to everything. So not alone can I click on you and your successful passes, I can click on next week's centre midfielder and watch all of his successful actions in his game last week, or watch, all shots on target by Finn Harps in their last 4 games. Like that's literally a click of 2 buttons, and I've got an entire playlist there of all Finn Harps attacking shots in the last 4 games.
And that's the company giving that to you. It's not your analyst going doing that. So your analyst then can, or you or both can go spend your time analysing and putting purpose around that based on your team or a team you're coming up against and go deeper on that. They're not spending their time collecting data or coding data.
Yeah, exactly. So that's, I mean, and listen, like, you know, what's literally the package that we had at Cove Ramblers is identical to the package that Jurgen Klopp had at Liverpool. Like, it's the same package worldwide. It's amazing how their business model works. So it is. So it's, and in terms of analysis, it's impossible not to be good at it. Impossible. All it requires is time and a bit of thinking. And listen, I'm particularly geeky in that area anyway. I would have been kind of majorly into that. And when I went to Dundalk, that's the role I went to Dundalk in. I actually went into Dundalk as their opposition analyst, and was purely in that role for at least 12 months. And I loved it. I absolutely loved it because, you know, whatever about preparing for an upcoming League of Ireland game, League of Ireland's a very small circle. Everybody knows everybody. You know, you're giving players packages about teams or about individuals that, let's be honest, they know 99% of it anyway. They've played against them 100 times. But we were going into Europe. We were playing against Molde. We were playing against Rapid Vienna. I literally had to go from zero base level knowledge, not knowing a single thing about that team, to being an absolute foremost expert in everything about them within the space of kind of 48 hours, and then be ready to present that in a consumable way to the players. So no, the performance analysis side of it on the A and the Pro in particular were massive. I mean, I'm lucky enough here. Look, there was probably only two full-time performance analysis roles in soccer a couple of years ago, and I was in one in that Dundalk role, and Gerard Dunn, who is still the performance analyst for the Irish international soccer team, was probably in the other, and myself and Gerard Dunn live 20 minutes from each other. We're both Leishmen, you know, so I would have picked up and Gerard would have been the person delivering to us on our pro license in that whole performance analysis area as well. So no, it's an area that's absolutely boomed, and is just so much harder to do to a high level in GAA because you have to go and code the whole bloody thing or find somebody who's going to go and code the whole bloody thing, and you have only access to so much information, and it's so much harder to do, you know.
Because there are some really good analysts, and they've such a good community in GAA. I really want to get a few on, so I've asked a couple before and they've turned it down. They said, no, talk wouldn't really be my thing. So if any good analysts are listening, you want, just give me a shout. I'm happy to have someone on board. Because even like I know, I suppose this year, we had a third year in the TY coding all our games for us, and did really go coding, but then we have to go away and make meaning of that, I suppose. And now one thing, Clubber has been some help, because I actually watched a good few year games last season, and obviously if we're playing all the other senior teams in Kilkenny, it's hugely helpful there, because while you're looking at all them, you also know other teams are looking at you, so you're even thinking in your style of play, we need to modify a bit, we cannot do the same thing all the time, we need to modify because they can see what we're doing. Anyway, that performance analysis module you've done, the learning you got from that, is that then a huge help to you in both, first of all, sitting down and looking at Limerick play or looking at Kerry play to see what is their game model and how can we see what it is, break it down, but maybe adapt it to our group of players that are in front of us, and roughly, without giving everything away, what are a couple of steps you do when you sit down to do that basic analysis? Like what's the first thing you look at when you're writing down?
Yeah, well, you hit the nail on the head there a couple of minutes ago. You're literally, so my probably the best way to explain this is what my presentation to the Dundalk players. Okay, so my presentation to the Dundalk players was very, very simple. It was the exact same format every time. So it had 5 sections. So it had, this is how the opposition build out from the back. So looking at how the opposition try and use the ball in their own half. This is how the opposition use the ball once they get over the halfway line. This is how the opposition try to stop you when you're trying to play out from the back. And this is how the opposition try and stop you once you get over the halfway line. And then section 5 was set pieces. And everything falls under one of those headings, really. So as you're watching a game, you're making your notes under those. It's kind of like nearly when you're doing your thesis. Do you know what's it? Do you know grouping or not grouping? What's it?
Thematic teams.
There we are. Yeah, exactly. So you're starting to build your teams underneath those 4 or 5 headings, and when you're writing down the time of a clip, you're placing that clip under one of those 5 headings, if that makes sense, and it starts to build that way for you. And look, the more you go at it, like the data side of it, like it's making sense of the numbers, like what is useful here to you, sort of a thing. Like there was, again, just to throw a really practical example out there, right? You'd get a passing matrix, right? Which is basically how many times every player on the field passed the ball to any other player on the field. So you could see, 2 passed it to 7 6 times, 4 passed it to 8 5 times, whatever. So where that might prove useful is, so let's say if in soccer terms, a number 10, a 10 can quite often be the creative fulcrum of a team, right? And sometimes maybe you zone in on the wrong thing. And I can think of, I once told my sitting midfielder I didn't care if he didn't kick the ball all day long, so long as Gary McCabe didn't kick the ball all day long either. He still reminds me of it, that I removed the enjoyment of the game from him from once in his life. But anyway, we would have progressed on a bit to, well, some of these 10s are so good that once they have the ball, it's almost impossible to shut them down. But hold on, let's have a look at the passing matrix and let's see who is he receiving the ball from. And I can think of this particular game where the opposition's left back was a superbly incisive passer. And almost every time he got the ball, he would lift his head and he would bang the ball through the lines, through the opposition midfield, into the 10's feet. And now the 10 looked fantastic. He was going off and scoring the goals and getting the assists and all of that kind of crack. But we would have worked very hard in training on that week on playing our right winger extremely narrow, tucking way in to try and block that passing lane, and say to the left back, you can give it down the wing to your 11, to your left winger all day long. We're going to free up that passing lane to you. But best of luck here to you to trying to play that ball from where you were receiving it through the lines into the 10. So it's using the numbers to spot kind of trends like that. Another one, John, that you probably like that we did with Cove and Galway when I was at Galway as well, was that match report. We would drop it into the players' WhatsApp group, right? And we might drop it, let's say we're training on a Wednesday evening, might drop it into the players' WhatsApp group on a Tuesday evening and say, boys, get a look at this when you get a chance. You know what's coming tomorrow night. So what's coming tomorrow night was, when the lads would arrive in, let's say we had a squad of 25, we'd split them into 5 groups of 5, and I would ask 5 questions. And the answer to those 5 questions was contained in the match report. But it was phones away at this stage. They had to have already digested the match report. And we just made a bit of crack out of it. We'd have like a reward for the team that got the most of the 5 questions right, and we'd have a punishment for the team that got the most of the 5 questions wrong. It's a bit of a skit, bit of a crack, bit of gallery. And then the most important thing was the 5 questions that were asked, the answers to those 5 questions, you would see that on the training ground. So if the answer to one of those questions was Gary McCabe is playing in the 10 for Bray Wanderers, what Bray Wanderers player gave the most amount of successful passes into Gary McCabe? If that was one of the questions we would ask, when we would go out in the training ground, they would see that we were working on the right winger tucking in to block off that passing lane, because we have identified that the left back is the person who gives it to Gary McCabe. So the questions would actually relate to the content we were doing on the pitch. So I'm toying around with that idea and how I bring that into my GAA practice as well.
The timing becomes more of a challenge there, like how much access you have to players and all. But that's a really good example of setting intent for learning, because the players know the stats, and like I assume in their groups of 5 they're also having chats around, like, the majority of players will be discussing making meaning from those numbers. And then if you're going working specifically on that, like, it's setting the tone in their head. Like, I remember a couple of years ago, I put up the session plan at lunchtime that day for that evening, and a few of the older players that would have had intercounty appearances, like, I love it. I know from lunchtime I'm focusing in on what we want to think about. Whereas some of the less motivated, or say the second team players, all they looked at was the running, and it nearly put them off. So I ended up just stopping doing it. But some players, I would get an old text at lunchtime being like, not so much where I am now, but previously, like, what are we working on this evening? I just want to start thinking about it now. So it's setting that intent as to what you are learning about. Yeah.
And listen, you can't ram it down lads' throats either. Some are into this, others aren't. And I think you just have to, rather than getting frustrated at that, like I've said before, he doesn't mind me saying it, like at Dundalk, Michael Duffy will probably win League of Ireland Player of the Year this year, I would think. Would have been probably our best player when I was at Dundalk as well. We had a lovely little video room for all our video sessions. Michael sat in the same seat every time, which was the back right hand corner, which put him furthest away from me, that he was hoping I wouldn't see that he was going for a little snooze, like, when this was going on. And yet, you'd go out on the Friday night to play your game, and 10 minutes before kick-off, Michael would approach you and say, the question would be something as simple as, Shane, did you say the right back is weaker on his inside or on his outside? And I'd say, he overcompensates on his inside, Michael. take him on down the outside. That'll do. Bang. That's all Michael Duffy needed to go out and be man to match in that game. So it's hard to argue. It's hard to, I'm not going to wake him up from his slumber as I'm putting on a presentation if that approach is working for him.
Yeah, no, really good. Two examples I actually have of analysis people might just find interesting in general. I remember back around 2017-18, I watched a presentation on YouTube from the Sports Sloan Conference. I'm matching you now for nerdiness here. It was based on someone analysing Leicester's patterns of play from the season they won the league. He was like an economist in London who liked soccer and liked code. He said, I'll just play around this, bought some data off Opta. And he started mapping out like their passing patterns. And he said, I don't know, in January it just got really different. So like where they were getting the ball and playing to and receiving it and working their attacks on. He said it's obvious other teams had started to cop it through their analysis. So Leicester slightly adapted their style of play, and he was able to map it out of like from September to Christmas it was the same, no changes. Over the Christmas period they started like, oh, they're not doing as well here. And then from mid-January onwards they just adapted to a new style of playing, kind of had 2 to 3 different options of doing stuff instead of the one way, because they'd figure out people were blocking what they were doing and needed just another way around it. And that's like you looking at where those passes come from. And just, I won't say who, but someone sent me on a few images one time. They plotted like the passes through the middle of Kerry's football play, and in one colour they had when Sean O'Shea was centre forward, one colour they had Paddy Clifford was centre forward, and it was so different. I was like, that is really interesting now. Whether it's like using different styles or more carried and kick or whatever like that. Now he gave me more information around it. I'm not going to say it, but it was just really interesting to show different patterns of play based on who is that centre forward.
And yeah, 100%. And you'll see that again. I will have a couple of key questions as a soccer manager. I would have a couple of key questions about the opposition when I'd be going to look at them. I'd have wrote down a couple of set questions that I need to get the answer to. And is the left-sided centre half left-footed or right-footed? Because there's more right-footed people than left-footed people. Quite often the left-sided centre-half is right-footed, so you will gear your angles of approach runs and all that based on that. And then the other one is the 6. Is the opposition 6 a creator or a destroyer? Similar to what you've said there about the 11 really in football maybe. Depending on their style, then you will go after or guard against particular things,
Yeah, and similar, like even a centre forward in hurling, if they're a come deep and receiver, if they're a runner, that'll decide both what your centre back and your defensive midfielder are doing, where they're setting up. Shane, this has been so good. Like, there's loads more I want to ask you about, but I'm very conscious of your time. I just said we'd wrap up with 2 brief things. One thing, coach and life in general, whatever you like. One thing underrated, one thing overrated. That you can go in either order at these.
Yeah, well, they're based on a similar theme, I suppose, really. So the underrated for me is the value of going for a coffee with a player. It's everything for me. I almost any player who has sparked for any period of time for me, regardless of what sport I was involved with them, it can nearly that upturn in form or that bit of momentum that can nearly always be traced back to a coffee and a chat that we had. If you can grab a player for a coffee on your own in a kind of a neutral environment for 15-20 minutes, you can change the world with that player. You can find out, where his head is at, what's working for him, what makes him tick, how he likes to learn, what areas he would most like to individually go after improvement in himself, endless feedback, absolutely endless feedback. And I just think it's so valuable for them. It's everything for me. It's everything. It gives you as a manager the opportunity to sell a particular tactical concept to them or theory to them and get buy-in from them on it. I just think the individual is everything. Yeah,
a particularly well-known example, that was good buddy yours, Roddy, when he went for coffee with Eddie back in 2019, and one of the big factors in leading to, alongside numerous others, but Laois is probably one of their more famous seasons or successful seasons there as well. Just so much of it boiled down when they asked what happened. Well, we went for coffee one day and he convinced me whatever, like.
Yeah. And then on the flip side, for me, the overrated one is that 10 minutes before throw in. Like, I would love to just eradicate it. Like, I know there's talks that Wenger just didn't do it. He just didn't do the team talk in the dressing room, the rah speech before everybody walks out onto the field. He just didn't. When they finished their warm up, they came back in. They did whatever they needed to do before they went back out, and Wenger wasn't even present in the dressing room, which would seem an alien concept to us. It's that's the period of time when we delivered the Braveheart speech. But I just find it impossible, bar the rarest of examples where somebody really manages to strike a chord. By and large, there is no way that something I can say can have a positive effect on 25 different people with 25 different backgrounds, with 25 different mentalities. If I say something, there's a good chance a third of them might think, Jesus, that was brilliant what he said there. A third of them might think that was so fucking cheesy and corny. And then there'll be a third of them in the middle who will be reasonably neutral to what was said. What can you say that's new and fresh, John, in that conversation either? In that couple of almost anything you say, they're going to have heard said a million times before. And it's almost like you're just trying not to say anything wrong. How do I fill that space? By saying something just to fill the space. I don't. I love that part of things to disappear.
I'd say straight up, half an hour before the game, I don't go into the dressing room. I just leave, help me warm up, go through whatever needs to be gone through, and if they have a question, I'll answer it. Otherwise, it's just, here are the tasks you have to do today, and do it. I'm probably just a bit of a boring person that goes like that anyway, but other people might be more inspirational in what they say. Shane, that's been excellent. Thanks so much for your time. If you want to plug any of the other podcasts you're on, your Balzahi or Off the Ball work or anything like that, feel free to throw them out here now.
No need. I suppose the only one that work related is we do have our own, if there is any Leash listeners, we do have our own Leash Coaching and Games podcast that we've got up and running there recently and is going quite well, where we literally just discuss what's going on from a coaching and games perspective in Leash, and encourage as much feedback from Leash GAA people in the county that if they have, I've often said I'm not the greatest innovator, or I don't have much of a left side, right side, all that brain crack that goes on. I'm good at doing other people's ideas. I'm not very good at coming up with my own ideas. So I use the podcast to get people to kind of hit me with ideas that I can then take the ball and run with, if that makes sense. So just Leash Coaching and Games, or Leash Games and Gales. Sorry, Leash Games and Gales, I think is the official title on it if you stick it into Spotify or Apple Podcasts or whatever. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you so much for your time, Shane. We'll definitely have you back on again at some stage. I've already lined up a topic with you for that future one, but people will see you on a screen soon, I'm sure, across a number of sports.
Cheers, John.